Storm troubles headed for Central America on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 29th. A new tropical depression enters the scene in the eastern Pacific, numbered 19E and likely to become a named storm in relative short order as it heads slowly towards the coast of Central America. Tammy is still holding on but is weakening quite quickly now as it moves away from Bermuda and is on borrowed time, I should say. Day 151 of hurricane season, and Tammy isn't alone though. There are two areas of interest that we've got marked, both at low chances at the moment, 20 and 30%, although that one, the northerly one, is much more immediate. That second one is going to be much later in this coming week. In the eastern Pacific, we're looking at Tropical Depression 19E, which will saunter towards the northeast at first and then turn back on itself, and a 30% area of interest that we've still got marked a little bit further out to sea that won't affect any land areas, but we're going to keep watching that with one eye. Now in the western Pacific, we've still got two areas of interest here, but still low chances for them at the moment. Something that's continuing to brew in that area, but no real outcomes just yet. But certainly one of them heading towards the Philippines and one of them towards the Mariana Islands. And in the North Indian Ocean, after that activity that we saw last week, there's nothing on the radar. There is a little bit of disturbed weather there in the tropical part of the Arabian Sea, but generally there isn't much going on. Just a few thunderstorms blowing up around the Malay Peninsula and in Thailand. Remnants of Lola have strengthened quite significantly, estimated winds of 60 miles per hour battering the northern coast of New Zealand at this point, which makes it probably one of the most immediate threats that we actually have right now, even though it's not tropical at this point. Well, here's Tropical Depression 19E. There's no warnings in effect yet. It is 365 kilometers from Tulaté in Guatemala, 418 from Tapachula in Mexico, 443 from Quetzaltenango in Guatemala, 479 from the capital, Guatemala City, and 526 from San Salvador, the capital of El Salvador. These areas don't often get tropical cyclone impacts, but it has happened before with dire consequences, so we've got to watch this one really closely. Let's check satellite imagery for everything that's going on around the world right now. Well, first of all, this tropical depression, which has started to get a little bit better rotation there, much more nicely presented with that rotation, but convection is still a little bit of a mystery there. There's not much of it going on at this point, so certainly tropical depression status appears to be justified, and it doesn't look like it's gotten any stronger since then, and it may be a slow burner as it slowly moves towards the northeast, and just how close it will get to land is unknown really. Now here's Tammy, really looking very poor now. For the second time it looks like it's going to see its terminus, and it's still blowing up a big chunk of convection off the northeastern area there, but it is quite far from the center now, and just general cloudiness moving in from the south as well, not associated with the storm, so Tammy's race is pretty much run. And this is the smaller area of interest further out to sea in the eastern Pacific, and it's looking pretty decent, to be honest. It's got a little bit of rotation there, which doesn't look very well stacked. It's got a little bit of convection as well, not huge amounts, but certainly has a little chance of getting to cyclone status. It's got probably about 3 or 4 days. And this is another invest in the Atlantic, the middle one, that more immediate one, northerly one out of the two areas of interest, and that's looking pretty decent on satellite imagery, but that's probably just about close to the best that it will get here. It's not got very much time at all to cause a spark, so I doubt that will form. Eastern Pacific then ahead of 19E, those sea surface temperatures remain very warm, around 30 degrees off the coast of Guatemala and El Salvador and over to Nicaragua as well, which it still has a chance of getting towards. The Atlantic still fairly warm in the Caribbean Sea, especially over 30 degrees Celsius. The Gulf Stream still churning up some warmer waters off the US East Coast, but along the immediate coastlines they're way chilled now. And out over the open Atlantic those temperatures still looking okay, but they are continuing to recede. Western Pacific, it's a similar story, but it's still got lots of heat there as well, in the Philippine Sea especially, and towards the east, and in the southern part of the South China Sea. High concentrations of heat there. Go for Thailand, well above 30 degrees over there, towards 32, and that's quite often why you see some late season development sometimes in that area. Bay of Bengal also looking good, 30 degrees around the Andaman Islands, and in the Arabian Sea temperatures looking okay, generally around 28 degrees Celsius. Southwest Indian Ocean really warming up along the west coast of Madagascar, almost reaching the southern tip of the country now. That happened quite quickly. Along the west coast of Australia, those warm waters as well, not too far from reaching Exmouth. And towards the east coast of Australia, the Coral Sea still got some catching up to do, and warm temperatures have reached Fiji and Port Vila in Vanuatu now. Compared to average, the South China Sea is boiling compared to normal, as is the Arabian Sea, parts of it. One or two spots in the South Indian Ocean as well, near Mauritius particularly, and the El Nino effect pretty pronounced there across the Eastern Pacific, but generally it's just a little bit above the average where 19E is. Caribbean Sea, very warm compared to normal as well. Keep watching that all the way to the end, because late season, Caribbean can really throw up a spanner in the works there, and very high amounts of oceanic heat content concentrated over that region. Eastern Pacific is almost spent, and the Western Pacific is starting to lose a little bit of its grip as well in the Philippine Sea. It is typhoon capital of the world, and it's still got plenty of potential energy there though. So let's check the GFS computer model then for the next 5 days. Tammy shoots off towards the east there and flees the scene. The other system there moving through the Bahamas doesn't last very long, and then later on, could there be a potential system developing in the Caribbean? Maybe some early signs of something there on day 5, but initially it's mainly about that system moving through the Bahamas, which doesn't look like it will form, but it will cause locally higher winds and possibly some substantial rainfall in some spots. Now the Eastern Pacific, of course, watching this tropical depression become a tropical storm and then move on towards the northeast near hurricane status. Could it really do a rapid intensification stint on us? Well, the good news is that the GFS turns it away before strong winds impact land, so that's good. Of course, there will be uncertainty about that, so we can't be fully sure that the storm will remain offshore. It's fairly small, and so that will also go in our favour as from a land point of view, but a storm not quite getting there. Now here's Lola, the strongest winds impacting the North Island of New Zealand pretty much right now, 60 miles per hour, that's over 90 kilometers per hour sustained winds, and those will push through the North Island and parts of the South Island throughout the next probably 2 days there, and you can see it sweeping through. The center of the storm reaches the northern tip of the North Island in about 24 hours, and then it really starts to lose shape and move towards the south-southeast. Now let's take a look at the rainfall expectations, and bear in mind before we look at the totals that if the track does shift towards a landfall, then we could be looking at much higher rain amounts, those high numbers offshore reaching inland. As it is, the storm and the wider environment around it is going to produce very high amounts of rainfall in one or two distinct spots there, in Honduras and in southern Mexico there. But along the Pacific coast, we're looking at maximums around 7 or 8 inches along the coast of maybe even Costa Rica and Nicaragua. That's 200 millimeters, and 32 inches there in one spot in Honduras. I'm not sure where that's fully being from this storm or what's just made that area the sweet spot, but that can't be ruled out there. That's 800 millimeters. That's really pretty impressive. Well, longer range then, day 5 to 10, we're looking out for that Caribbean system, and there it is. 4th of November it develops, and it becomes a substantial hurricane, and one that makes landfall in Jamaica now, we're expecting on the 6th of November. It is still quite a ways out, especially with the setup in the Atlantic right now being rather uncertain, but the GFS and other models have thrown up things like this for quite a while now. There is consistency, and that's a pretty powerful hurricane there. That's at least a category 3 major in the Atlantic late season. Well, we're following 19E, there it is, having a second life and a much stronger life as a significant, maybe even major hurricane there, moving out over the eastern Pacific towards the west and then turning northwards, sort of making a little bit of a kind of a hinge track is all I can think of, moving westwards and then curving back towards the north like a door handle. But there it is, a powerful hurricane at various points, but remains small throughout that entire period up to day 10. Now this is the Western Pacific. A storm forms there around the 2nd or 3rd of November, becoming a typhoon east of the Mariana Islands, possibly getting into stronger territory, and then continuing northwestwards and really getting stronger after it passes the Mariana Islands on the 8th. Now previous runs from this GFS model had it recurving, so that's still a possibility, and you can see it's thinking about it on a couple of occasions there before it starts to shift further towards the west. So still a lot of uncertainty about that, but very strong at the end of that 10-day period. That's all the serious stuff done. Scan the barcode and that will take you to the Force 13 merch store, where we have all of our usual items as well as our full season individual Storm animations on request, and are still waiting for Hone t-shirts, still very much in stock, unlike Hone. Well, in the Scilly range, this very powerful hurricane sweeps through eastern Cuba and then grazes the northern coast there, and then leaps over to eastern Florida, affecting all of that region around Miami, and then up the east coast, taking advantage of what's left of the Gulf Stream in that late season scenario. So really a big potential from this storm. I'm thinking of storms like Matthew maybe later in the season. It's almost like Sandy track wise, except the big hook at the end, and it turns post-tropical off the coast of New England, sweeping up towards the northeast. Still very uncertain about that scenario. It's very long range. Now look at this, there's 19E potentially getting close to land for a second time in Mexico 2 weeks after it did the first time further east, and so that storm lasts for quite a long time. It eventually dissipates there. We're talking probably like the 11th of November there that it probably dissipates completely, but once again it gets close to land, but nothing behind it, no other areas of interest to watch in the Eastern Pacific, and I think that might just be it for the season there. Now the Western Pacific with this very strong typhoon, and they're prone to curve back towards the southwest at this time of year sometimes. Well, does this storm do that? It's thinking about it, and eventually, yes, it does make that curve further towards the southwest, gets much larger, loses some strength, but at the end of day 16 there, and stressing once again, it's a very long way out. It is still a potent threat there to Luzon in the Philippines, and possibly even still to Taiwan, although at this time of year you would start to expect that storms completely get shredded up before they get there. You can talk about all of this on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13 for tropical weather and general weather chat with thousands from around the world. And certainly quite a busy bulletin still, but on this day it was 2006 when we had a very powerful Category 5 typhoon, Cimarron, with wind speeds of 165 miles per hour piling into the coast of Luzon in the Philippines. A very powerful storm landfall, and of course teamed up with Dorian, which also impacted that region later on that year. And we also had Tropical Storm 6B that was hugging the east coast of India, moving northwards at this point, and naming was just about starting at this point in the North Indian Ocean, but that one didn't get a name in the end. Well, we're code blue. The next name in the Atlantic is Vince. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Pillar. Looks like we're about to get that. And in the Central Pacific, it remains Hone. Blimey. The next name in the Western Pacific then is Jelawat. And in the North Indian Ocean, we're still looking out for Midhili. We've had 74 storms so far around the world this year, which is just 18 away from the annual average, although I think we might still fall just a tad short, but it has been quality over quantity. Jasper's the next name in the Australian region. Southwest Indian Ocean starts with Alvaro, and in the South Pacific the next name is Mal. Our next tropical weather bulletin is on Monday night. We'll see you then.